Chapter 56. The Hatching. Chase. A glint of gold flashed in the corner of his eye, and Jace peered upwards over his shoulder. Above, Sunfire soared like a glimmering streak of light across a cloudless sky, chased closely by Norbert snapping like a bloodthirsty hound for his tail. Faltering in his step on the rocky path, Jace considered saying something. He didn't know what could be done at this point. It was just... what if it escalated into more aggression, and Norbert killed Aegon's dragon? Jace scratched his arm. As the adults plainly saw it, yet didn't mind, he took his cue from them. Oh well, it'd probably be fine. Where Sunfire was distinctly glimmering, Norbert's scales blended with the blue sky. Without the hard shadows of the blaring sun, and just a bit of cloud coverage, Jace knew Norbert would become nearly indistinguishable. Both Dreamfinder and Norbert shared the advantage of being optimally camouflaged where they preferred to roam: the sky. Jace's own sleek green Vermax was better camouflaged flying low with the forest underneath him. Then any larger dragon soaring above him would usually miss him entirely. It had been a boom on Dragonstone to merge with the green fields, because the cannibal dwelt there. And back when Norbert still lived there, she'd proven a bullying menace too. "Be mindful, the steps are a bit steep," Hagrid called, and Jace's gaze dropped to follow Hagrid, his mother and stepfather. They needed a guide to find the Dragon Point, as the sanctuary for young hatchlings was not visible above ground, unless you knew how to navigate. Crackle didn't have a volcano like Dragonstone, nor was it a stately building like the Dragon Pit. No, for all the world could see, it was a tall pillar that marked the placement of the beach cave. The Dragon Point was inside, tucked away within the cavernous hills, and honestly rather cumbersome to access. Almost an hour's ride away on horseback from Castle Point by rough roads, which grew narrower and wilder the closer they got. Nearly everything else had been ridiculously accessible, from the docks to the town to the castle itself, but this was nearly primitive in comparison. Still reachable, but Jace found both the Dragon Pit and Dragonstone far better in terms of ease of access. "How the fuck do people get here?" his mother asked, steadying herself on the decline. "Most don't," Hagrid replied, sounding very pleased about it too. "Will you make better roads here eventually?" Jace wondered. "Like you've done from Port Point to the castle?" Not out here, but we are in talks with the Broons about creating some sort of safe passage through the Wisps. That'll be the next project, connecting Port Point back with the mainland by something else but boat or dragon." "And here?" Rhaenyra asked. "Wouldn't it be preferable to travel by carriage? How do you get supplies to the dragons?" Hagrid shrugged, not seeing an issue at all. "Put it on a boat at Port Point and start rowing, of course. As long as the ocean isn't too bad, a small boat gets through the bay to the Dragon Sanctuary just fine. For everything else, we walk. I'll make the trip every day. You get used to it." After passing the beacon, they followed Hagrid in a single row down a staircase running along the cliffside. The wind hit them sideways, whipping hair and cloaks everywhere, and creating a low humming sound, until they reached down to the beach where there was a tall, jagged opening between boulders, and inside, nothing acted right. On the outside, the entrance merely appeared like a perfectly naturally formed cave, but within, everything had been extended. It was a vast, echoing cave, hollowed out into a large hall, where everything was stretched until it became a mind system fit for creatures the size of dragons. Sunlight streamed through a few holes to the outside world, mostly around the entrance towards the sea, but a few from above too, like they were ways to climb through the roof into the forest above, or for the unobserved wanderers in the woods to fall through into a dragon's den. There were more columns within the cave, square, massive stone pillars reaching towards the jagged ceiling, but only half were load-bearing ones. Every second one stopped halfway to the roof, and instead held one of those flaming circles. They were spaciously placed along a line down the cave, lighting the pathway into the depths. "This cave is monstrous," The end of Damon's sentence bounced between the cave walls. Was this always here? His mother asked, trailing off listening to her voice distorted on the echo too. Hagrid didn't let it halt him and began explaining with factual gusto. It was a large system when we first scouted the cave, aye. Crackle lost many of these cavernous hills. Here the sea already did a bleeding decent job hollowing out tunnels for us, but we burrowed wider and deeper too, like we did in the Fangs. Sometimes the dragons are out here for feedings and play, but they prefer the depths better. Come along. With an exhale and a roll of his shoulders, Jace fell into step again. Curious and excited, but with a healthy sense of caution. He was threading into a dragon's den, and the further they went, the stranger it got. Soon there were no streams of sunshine, leaving only the rings of fire to illuminate the cave, and not all those were normal. Every other circle burned blue as Norbert's fire, like Hariel's bluebell spells, switching between a pattern of 3. A load-bearing column, then a red fire, then the blue, and on and on and on. It was part of the reason why Jace thought of the trick of the light when the cave ceiling seemed blurry, but it grew more pronounced, thicker. He began wondering if it may be a strange case of fog. They were by the ocean after all, but then another, more alarming suspicion came upon him. Was it smoke? Jace halted. What's that up there? Is the cave on fire? Even as the words fell off his lips, it seemed off. It was neither smoke nor fog. Jace stared, and likened it most of all to mist, or as if there was a cloud coverage running along the top of the cave, thick at the top and thinning down so they didn't affect those on the floor. Yet not... Jace couldn't place why it seemed like more, but he could swear there was a shimmer to it. A low, ambient glow that was barely notable while so harshly outshined by the burning hoops. The coiling forms of mist rolled and tumbled in on itself into calm, mesmerizing shapes, akin to swirling patterns in the sea, like how water rings ripple the surface, or bubbles, though as insubstantial as shimmering mists. Oh, that's a mess, but a workable mess. At least it's no longer raining. The dragons did not like that. Hagrid chortled. It's different kind of airstreams and some other stuff. Conjured by magic, of course, not natural, Hagrid said. We were experimenting with steam, mist and fog, basically clouds, and seeing how the dragons respond to it. As long as it's not rain clouds, they take a shine to it. I or Hariel have to maintain it at least once a moon, but it's worth it. Even when they don't fly in it, they sometimes perch high. You see, there's beams and openings up there you can't see through the mist, but sometimes they stand on them and just flap their wings in the smoke. It creates really amazing shapes in the mist which we can see here on the ground too. They manipulate it themselves, you know. Dragons have an instinctive knack of magic too, Hagrid said fondly, while Jace's mind wasn't quite able to keep up. Was he insinuating that dragons could control magic? Like Hagrid was? Well, that reminds me, keep a lookout for any sudden swirls up there. Sometimes Thunderstrike likes hiding in the mist, and he comes swooping out to scare you like he's an actual lightning bolt. It's just fun and games though, but it's given a lot of people a fright before. But it stimulates them, gives them more fun and more to do than just sleep while stuck inside. That's something you never did on Dragonstone, Damon stated. His stepfather brought up a valid point. If they could do this, how come they hadn't? Most of the magic we've used is experimental, Damon, Hagrid answered, looking at him as if he was missing the obvious. It worked out, but we didn't know that when we started. It could have gone badly, couldn't it? Magical mishaps isn't quite the same as a regular mess. One thing is messing up some beach caves, but we couldn't risk messing up Princess Rhaenyra's castle. That'd be pretty rude. You'd have blown your lid if we accidentally melted the dragon den for a fortnight, and your dragons even more so, with good reason. And you have a grasp of it now? After a year and a half of practicing this branch of magic, sure, Hagrid agreed. We had some basic charms that came in real handy the entire time, but a lot we learned as we went too, though the baby meant Hariel's needed to slow down a bit. This is slow? Jace murmured numbly. 7 hells. They should have come sooner. Jace thought as they left what seemed to be the entrance hall, nothing more, leaving the light from the opening in distant glimmer, until he turned a twist in the tunnel and it was gone entirely. By the invitation of the king, at least his mother, and Jace as her heir, had to show their faces at Castle Point. None were enthused to attend Aemon's name day, though by happenstance they'd been delayed and missed it. But there had been other reasons to show. It wasn't only Aemon here, even if the prickly prat was particularly hard to ignore, prancing proudly about the point with his new title of Sir Pratt. But Hariel and Hagrid were here too, and his mother had to make judgment of how the new sanctuary fared. As the king's heir, she had a duty to guarantee the eggs and young dragons sent there were thriving, though being heavy with child meant Rhaenyra hadn't been able to come sooner. Then again, none predicted there would be anything to see yet. They had expected it'd take at least a decade, closer to 2, for the castle to be erected. Who could have foreseen it'd get twice as far in but a year and a half? It was ludicrously far ahead of schedule, and for the longest time Jace hadn't fully believed it either, despite Hagrid himself keeping them in the loop by messengers. After he flew over Crackalaw a few times, Jace confirmed it wasn't exaggerated rambling, bearing witness from afar of how fast the Dragon Point came together, growing larger and larger for each trip. Yet that was from afar, in glimpses from up high. Up close it was more substantial, and he felt conflicted. It was hard to swallow that the man who blundered over even the most basic courtly etiquettes could be so resourcefully successful on such an ambitious undertaking. Simultaneously, it was no surprise in the slightest. Hagrid was a good, dutiful man, an honourable one who stood firm by his principles, foreign though some of them were. Yet he didn't bend under the pressure. Somehow, in ways Jace wished he could replicate, the pressure bent around him. Yet Hagrid's great prosperity left a bitter aftertaste when it simultaneously meant Aemon benefited too. It was ironic. Amongst his uncles, the second oldest son of the king was the most unpleasant, sour, and the least deserving one. Shouldn't this have been Aegon's? Then at least Bella could have had something worthwhile in her miserable marriage to that crippled drunkard. Jace rubbed his smooth jaw, feeling the irritating itch in his neck. Then again, Hagrid was a lord, and Hariel his heir. The only way that end up Aegon's before Aemon was if Hariel married the eldest son instead. There was no way this could have gone into Bela's hands. It had always rested on whom Hariel married. Jace couldn't make up his mind whether what came to pass was strictly good or bad. Either way, it was certainly not ideal. If it had been up to Jace to decide, the way Hariel felt it had been up to her to ponder over his match, then he'd change it all. He wouldn't have had let her marry either of those high towers. He'd have made Hariel marry Daemon. Luckily, his mother would have resented Hariel it. Jace wasn't blind. But what should that matter? Jace hadn't fought the betrothal to Helena, despite having to watch Bela replaced with an aunt he had nothing to talk about with. Though sweet in her own way, Helena was peculiar, distant, with queer habits. But it didn't matter. She was obedient enough to do her duty, and didn't need to be paraded around for everyone to see her oddness. Jace would have to fulfill that part, and was driven to do it too, because he could recognize a blatant benefit when it was dropped into his lap. It's not that Bela had been a bad option, but Jace acknowledged Helena was more useful in the current political situation, even if she was worse for Jace personally. As the future king, his duty wasn't about personal preferences. It was about what would stabilize the realm and strengthen his house. Why couldn't the rest do the same? Hariel marrying Daemon wouldn't have made for a particularly joyous marriage. Jace wasn't blind to that either. But it still would have been beneficial for everyone, both for what it achieved and what it would have prevented. He wished his mother had seen beyond her own love for Daemon to acknowledge that too. Aemon was now a headache, joined by blood to the child growing in Hariel's womb. But another, bigger issue were the Velaryons. Mayhaps if Daemon hadn't rushed to marry Rhaenyra before Jace's father was even buried, things would have never unraveled the way they had. mayhaps they'd have retained the Valarian support. Mayhaps Luke would have still been heir to Driftmark. Mayhaps his little brother Viserys could have had his own dragon. And with Hariel married to Daemon, this prosperity at Crackle would be under the thumb of the Rogue Prince, instead of the prickly one. Instead, major supporters Jace had once thought iron secure were fumbling away. One ally seemed gone for good, whilst the other remained a friendly face, but whom was now shackled by wedding vows to an utter prick like Aemond. And to what end? Prince Daemon could never fill Sir Laenor's shoes. Jace missed his father even more than he missed him, Sir Harwin. Certainly, Sir Harwin was part of his childhood memories, and he had long associated him with a large, powerful guard. When he'd been around, it seemed nothing could touch them, until it turned out unbeatable knights could be killed when their foe was fire. The irony. Was it an accident? Was it cursed? Harwin Strong had played with fire, made fools of dragons, before fire became his end. It was an uneasy thought, and there was always this little part of him wondering, as the seed born of their sins, what did that make Jace? As much as his memories of Harwin were fond ones, there was a red taint over everything. The Strong Knight was both a symbol of protection, but also the man who had seen Jace's life ruined. Had Harwin never met his mother, Jace would not be Jace would be no one's but Laenor's son, as he always should have been. After Harwin Strong died, Sir Laenor had been given room in Jace's life which he couldn't recall was quite as pronounced before. It was years ago, and mayhaps his memory wasn't all accurate, but it seemed his father feasted less, tried harder, and took an interest in and committed himself to their family. He taught Joffrey to dance, Visenya to talk, taught Luke to operate a crossbow and practiced the blade with Jace, whilst overseeing everyone's dragon training. Jace knew the man had inspired him, but for a couple of golden years at Dragonstone, he'd almost forgotten it. It was the most painful truth of them all, how much Jace wished it was different. If he'd just been Laenor's son, how much easier his life would be. It had been a dream, followed by a nightmare. They lost Laenor, and the replacement, not a week after he was slain meaninglessly in a fucking tavern, was Daemon Targaryen. He certainly thought highly of himself, his stepfather, prancing around like he was the Prince of Dragonstone, not unlike Aemon swaggered around to point. But Jace knew. They were both leeches, sucking on their wives' achievements to lift their influence and power at the expense of their spouses. Jace glanced over to where his stepfather aided his wife over a rock. How considerate. If only he could keep to such mindful mannerism whenever his temper riled too. Daemon had royal validity, but thanks to his inheritance it was no more valid than what Laenor held. He also had no lands, no holding, no armies, barely any gold. No allies, but a long list of enemies. He had no standing at court because he'd pissed off most of them, then ran away to Essos for over a decade where he hadn't made any more. His last meaningful ally had been Corlys, and look how that ended. Though Caraxes was a formidable dragon, the Bloodworm alone hadn't been worth losing Seasmoke and Meleys over. Losing the Valarian fleet, the richest house on the continent, and everything had been going wrong since. They'd only been losing support. Crucial support with access to dragons, whilst gaining nothing they wouldn't already hold if his mother and Daemon never married in the first place. From where Jace stood, it felt an awful lot like the only one benefiting from their match was Daemon alone, whilst it weakened his mother, weakened Jace. The only stroke of luck within their union was that the children Rhaenyra bore their stepfather remained girls. A whilst back, Jace mustered up courage enough to ask his mother regarding these matters. Surely there were signs of this eluding him, but her response had been lacking. She may claim it was political to secure Daemon, as if it had been a strategic alliance and not a preference. But hadn't that been achieved through Rhaena and Luke's betrothal? The truth was plain. His mother loved Daemon. That's why. And Daemon loved her. Jace could see that too, but who didn't? So was Jace supposed to believe Daemon would have supported Autoslot if his mother hadn't married him? If they'd respected the king's refusal of their reunion? Because it had been denied and they ignored it. His mother reassured Jace with soothing words, and they weren't invalid. He saw that too. It didn't matter what they said. Even with Daemon as her husband, the king had kept her as heir anyway. It was treason to oppose his decrees. Westeros, the Velaryons and the Hightowers, everyone had no choice but to accept what he ordered. So how come things kept turning for the worse? How come each time he stepped off Dragonstone, Jace felt the prickles at the base of his neck, whilst glimpsing judgment in the eyes about him? Why did he still feel it looming? Luke was growing ever more insecure about his disinheritance, the uncertainty of his standing and being the face of Corlys Velaryon's rejection, whilst Viserys the Younger toddled around the echoing hallways of Dragonstone like the ghost of Laenor the Unburnt. His mother and stepfather sometimes discussed, behind closed doors, how the king's biggest heir was marrying Alicent Hightower instead of Laena Velaryon, leaving a young Rhaenyra with no choice but to pick up her father's slack and marry the Velaryons to bind them back into the Targaryen fold, though none of it would have happened if the king wasn't taken advantage of at such a vulnerable time in his life. And all Jace could do was look between them thinking, was his mother blinded to the irony? For her second match, she'd been tricked into a marriage during a vulnerable situation too. Her grief over Emma and Laenor and the fear of being a woman alone made her throw caution to the wind. It had been with minimal regard for political outfalls, nor any input from council, allies, kin or her children, even directly against the king's leave. Not so long before, Jace had been bound to marry Helaena to try uniting the house back together, only for everything to be strained anew through his mother's marriage. There were days Jace wondered what his and Helena's betrothal even accomplished, what Aegon and Bela had been for, because it was as if their house had all taken a very important step forwards, only to be dragged 5 steps back. And worst of all, it made Jace naggingly concerned that his mother remained too stubborn with love to acknowledge the choice of spouse had been a bad choice. Or maybe she did, but couldn't admit it. It wouldn't be the first time. Because at this point the damage was done. It couldn't be changed without worsening a precarious situation. Expressing doubts or objections where the wrong ears may hear could be twisted against him, but he couldn't forget. Yet Jace would do his duty. He would keep resolute, and he would not complain, because someone had to. Besides, what would complaining achieve? What did it matter? Jace's preferred options of what should have been hadn't come to pass, from his parents to Bela to Haryl's match. Though none on Dragonstone except the Septa and Helaena had celebrated Haryl's marriage to Aemond, it hadn't seemed too bad a blow at first. Jace knew marrying a foreign witch was a dumb pick for anyone with designs for the throne, and he'd thought it was Aemond's way to gracefully bow out of the game entirely. That, or he dumbly shot himself in the foot with a crossbow he'd been too short-sighted to aim right. But now, it was slightly alarming how much they'd achieved. They turned a near abandoned piece of land into a bustling port, where a previously forgotten village now appeared a thriving, growing town, and still had time to build a castle and work on a dragon sanctuary, in a year and a half. What lord wouldn't take notice of that? Could it be enough that some lords may start overlooking Haryl's foreignness? Or would it just make it more obvious? And what if the babe in Haryl's belly was a boy? Jace's pondering faded as Hagrid pointed down to a hole in the ground and dropped into a pool of water. "Keep to the path. Hagrid warned. "Those are deeper than they look." "A bath would be nice though. It's getting rather warm," his mother said. "The dragons prefer the heat," Hagrid said. "We don't have a volcano like you do, so we found other ways to keep the dens warm for them." Their footsteps echoed whilst the temperatures grew stifling. Jace pulled up his sleeves and opened the string on his collar as he trekked over the uneven rocky cave floor. It struck Jace that all the magic, all the effort, was up there, on tall columns, perched out of reach or along the roof, way above the reach of men, beyond the reach of Hagrid's great height too. Initially he figured they simply weren't done yet. It was so bare-boned to the ground. It was obviously within Hariel and Hagrid's capability to make the Dragon Point comfortable for men too, but here it just wasn't. From the cumbersome path to reach the sanctuary, to the insides, it felt like a lot could be done to improve it. It may be spacious, but it was easy to stumble, too hot, with nothing but sharp jagged stones and pools of seawater rushing in from treacherous holes hidden in shadows. Easy to step into, because all the attention was upwards. That's where everything was. Jace yearned to climb up there, to explore that magic alongside the dragons. What did the mist feel like to touch? Was it as liquid as it looked? Was it thin as air? What secrets may be found beyond the clouds? But the only way he'd know was if Vermix flew him up there. And then it clicked. It wasn't a lack. It was intentional. This was never meant as a home for men. It was the House of Dragons. This was a sanctuary of young fire-breathers, and only the dragons enjoyed these accommodations. If you had wings, you were welcome to play here. If not, there was no casual comforts inviting men to stay longer than they needed to. It wasn't safe for feeble creatures like them. Get out. "Morning, morning," Hagrid called out, waving a beefy hand as they passed. Jace tilted his head back, eyes trailing up a stone column to a massive ring of fire atop it. There within a circle sat a dragon, neck craned down to peer down at them from her tall perch. The pink dragon had grown larger, and she followed Jace with her sharp eyes, uncaring of the blue fire ring she'd made her perch, which spit and crackled, casting harsh shadows dancing across her body. "Why the fiery rings?" Damon asked. "I don't see any logs, and oil wouldn't burn long. They're burning by your magic, I presume." "They do," Hagrid nodded. "We started with normal columns with a beacon on top, for heat and lighting and somewhere for the dragons to stand and stretch, but Hale thought to turn them into hoops. We had this flying game back home in Britain, Quidditch, where you flew in the air and threw a ball through hoops not too different from these ones. They weren't on fire, of course, but the rings were about that size. Perhaps a bit smaller, those ones. Didn't need to fit dragons in them, you know? But Hale was a crackling good seeker. But anyway, we might not be able to play that game anymore, but the dragons loves the hoops too. Sometimes we play catch the prey, flying through the hoops. Though the rest of the time they prefer standing there because it's a warm perch and elevated, just like morning is." The dragon snorted, claws tightening around the big ring, the blue fire licking up her muscled legs and tucked leathery wings, her tail swishing like a whip. For what had once been a cute pink little dragon, she looked fucking ferocious now. "I don't think we'll see Thunderstrike at this time of day, but I can show you his nest if you're interested. He's an early riser and will be out fishing, unlike Morning. She's more of a night hunter. After a night out she comes home right before dawn, then sleeps past noon. The only time Morning is not awake is usually the hours that could be considered mornings, while Thunderstrike is more regular there, and likes searching the sea for prey, especially seals and walruses. He took a killer shark once too." They had a little more to go before they finally reached the ring of fire along the ground, not up there on the columns, circling like a burning fence around a stack of boulders in its center. "This is her nest." Hagrid pointed to the boulders. "Cozy and warm." "Very warm." Damon dabbed at his brow. "What's the smell upon the air here?" Rhaenyra asked. Like rotten eggs? The volcano smell charm, Hagrid explained. It's weak now, that's why it's not quite right. I need to reapply it. It always weakens after a fortnight. Jace wrinkled his nose. At full effect, he'd smelled that spell before. Though Hagrid had been banned from using it on the dens too close to Dragonstone, he'd use it on the ones further out. Damon nodded to the boulders. What are we waiting for? To melt? Get on with it then. Lure her out now. Hagrid unhooked that long, pink-clothed piece of wood and aimed it upwards. Hagrid muttered some words in his odd language, and next a hissing sound filled the cave. He said something else, and suddenly a burst of fire sprang from the tip of the wand. An answering screech sounded from between the boulders, and the hatchling shuffled out with the jerky stumbles of a youngling who had not yet gained full control of their limbs, its long neck curling, sniffing, and watchful of the intruders. It seemed to have a dark orange body, or perhaps it'd be yellowish in daylight, but with horns and wings the color of deep scarlet. As it stood up, Jace noted a reddish belly pattern too, zigzagging. She reminded Jace slightly of a gecko with wings, until she opened her mouth in a menacing smile, displaying an overcrowded maw of shark-like teeth and a long tongue lolled out. There she is, Hagrid beamed. Beautiful, ain't she? The dragon scratched at the ground, bent her neck and licked the gravel. She is. Damon spoke softly, observing the dragon with a kind of respect Jace didn't see him grant anything that didn't have wings. Not even his wife. Not even his king. Have you a name ready for her? Hagrid glanced excitedly to Rhaenyra. Shrikos, his mother declared. For the first dragon hatched at Cracklaw, I, Princess Rhaenyra of House Targaryen, hereby name her Shrikos. Shrikos. Hagrid tested the name out. Shrikos was a volcano in Old Valyria, Damon clarified for him. One of the dooms named Mount Shrikos. It had not been one of the gods though, as other dragons were named after. All those names were used up. A volcano? A very fitting name, no doubt about it. But it was part of the doom? Is it a bit too eruptive for such a sweetie pie? Damon giggled, the sound echoing and making Shrikos turn her head, her scarlet eyes predatory on Jace's stepfather. There was nothing sweet about that gaze in the slightest. No, Shrikos seemed perfectly suitable. She's 3 moons old? His mother dabbed at her brow with a napkin. She is. You'll have space for another here? His mother clarified. He's the same size. Lunaxus? Hagrid asked, perking up with interest. Yes, the dragon handlers have kept a close watch on him, Jace said, appreciating Hagrid's enthusiasm. Though, admittedly, Shrikos was the same size as Lunaxus, who was hatched on Dragonstone over a year ago. They have noted down Lunaxus' growth process too. It's within the parameters, he told Hagrid, tapping his hand against his thigh. It was the truth. Lunaxus was within parameters, though the old ones. Yet when Hagrid dwelt on Dragonstone, the dragons kept breaking all previous growth expectations. Whilst a year ago, Lunaxus hatched as silvery as Sunfire was golden, and had since reached the size of a dog. The same size Shrikos was at 3 moons old. Shrikos may be a little larger. Whilst Norbert, at 1 year old, had been the size of a warhorse. Ebrion, Morning, Taraxis, Thunderstrike, they all grew exceptionally under Hagrid's care. Erex, Vermex, Norbert and Moondancer had all put on weight and height yearly too. Jace didn't understand it. No one did. Though they'd assumed using Hagrid's methods after he left could still manage similar results. Perhaps not perfect, but better than before. They'd used the same concoctions in the incubator cauldron of chicken blood as Hagrid did. In Lunaxus' infancy, they'd made that odd strong elixir to feed him, even if that had proved extremely challenging. Lunexis wanted roasted meat, not liquids, and coaxing him into consuming it the way Hagrid had been able to was near impossible. They'd followed the same steps, but there were things Hagrid could do with his wand they simply couldn't. Looking around, Jace was reminded of just what that was. Had they seen it all now? As for themselves, they could still hatch dragons at Dragonstone, with so many larger beasts leaving too. Moondancer, Norbert, Vhagar. The ones left behind had more space to roam than before, making the dragons more manageable. Yet Lunexis' development, though within reason, had been lackluster. We've got room for them. The space isn't the issue here. We only have one baby now, Shrikos I mean. And the caves goes deep, princess. Thunderstrike and Morning are no babies anymore and don't need to be here in the sanctuary, but they just won't leave. Hagrid shrugged it off as if to say, what can you do? You can't really tell them to go. I think I'll figure it out when it gets too inconvenient to keep flying in and out, or if you get some riders to bond with them. But until then, we have alternative dens for when this nursery gets too cramped for their wingspan. Hagrid shared speculatively. Nursery? Jace glanced around. A dragon nursery. It wasn't wrong, but it felt too inadequate a definition. Hagrid turned on his heel, gesturing for them to follow him back the way they'd come. Thank the Seven. Jace was burning up. The only problem I have with taking on another is that I need to train more men. Just the little ones have a decent piece of area to themselves here. And this cave ain't where Vhagar, Vermivore or Norbert lives. They have their own homes spread about that fits them better. But I can't be everywhere all at once either. His mother took careful note of everything being said. This is its main purpose, for young dragons to thrive, to have space to grow strong. You've done your duty well, my lord. Thank you, princess. His bushy beard and flickering light made it hard to see properly, but Jace thought he may be flushing from receiving the princess's gratitude. Then we're sending Lunexis here. We expect he'll be bonded to our daughter Rhaenys in time, but for the present they're both too young. It is better for Lunexis to grow into his full potential in the meanwhile. It'd have been even better to order Hagrid to Dragonstone so Lunexis and his sister Rhaenys could grow side by side, but it couldn't be. Hagrid was lord of his own lands, with an increasing number of small folk moving to the point, a fresh castle, and held a dragon sanctuary for this precise purpose, for young dragons to thrive. The other option was to leave Rhaenys behind to be fostered at the point. It was an odd thing to consider for a 3 moons old babe, but it had to be considered, if only for appearance's sake. Though that would happen over Jace's dead body. No matter how impressive an accomplishment the castle was, the town and the sanctuary, he was never leaving his sister alone under a roof where so much influence was wielded by Aemond Targaryen. The prickly cunt. Though the direction of their topic made Hagrid glance between Jace to Daemon and over to his mother, then asked something he'd expected sooner. Are you taking Thunderstrike back for Visenya to complete a proper bond between them? I think you'll need to bring your daughter here if you actually want that to happen. Thunderstrike has settled a bit. He'll need incentive to move then now, a bond to bring him home. Jace exhaled. How he wished he could say yes. He dearly wished to understand where Visenya's terror of dragons stemmed from. It was baffling and very inconvenient. Mayhaps she'd been startled as a babe, or she found flying in heights scary? Or mayhaps it was because she'd not had an egg in her cradle like her older brothers did. They'd been following Hagrid's advice on not doing that, and it was hard to argue at the results with the dragons. But look at what it was doing to the rider. However, it was impossible to say if that was his fault alone, because her youngest brother Viserys hadn't had an egg in his cradle either. That lack hadn't stopped the boy from constantly asking after dragons. Where Visenya was pushed towards them, his mother had tried distracting Viserys away with tales of great knights and lordships, hoping to steer Viserys Velaryon on a more reasonable path for what he could expect of his dragonless future, a burden forced on him by Corlys and Rhaenys. Though his mother hadn't had much traction yet. There were too many dragons around Viserys Velaryon not to notice, and at 2 years old he was learning to speak sentences, and half of them regarded dragons. So mayhaps lacking a dragon egg in her cradle wasn't the sole reason behind Visenia's aversion. All they knew with certainty is that it hadn't gone away, and how, in their attempt to fix it, they'd made it worse. Visenia is only 4 and still favors dolls more than dragons. His mother said with a laugh that utterly glossed over the huge fight that happened between her and Damon about a year ago. The only time Jace had genuinely wondered if Rhaenyra regretted her choice of spouse after all. If they both did. It had been ugly. I think it'll be another year when Visenia is 5, mayhaps 6. His mother waved the matter away. She'll be old enough to see things differently. One could hope. Mayhaps Visenia would notice how different she was, to understand some of the pressure, comprehend the freedom and strength she could have if Visenia's own irrational fear would just stop keeping her back. At least his younger sister Rhaenys wasn't showing a hint of that reluctance. His mother had strapped Rhaenys in a sling, climbed Cyrex, and flown the babe to Castle Point without issue. The babe had spent the first half gurgling happily, and the rest sleeping sweetly like she was in the safest crib. Had his mother tried that with Visenia? Well, Damon had tried just that, hadn't he? They'd noted her reluctance early, and tried to nudge her gently towards dragons in her toddler years, yet she never warmed to the idea. She'd get angry, grumpy. Sometimes she'd cry if made to get too close. But though annoying, it hadn't been unmanageable. And then his stepfather had a brilliant idea, the dumb twat. What use was he? Damon presumed the solution to this was pushing more dragons on Visenia. He decided to solve it all by merely throwing her into the dragon den, with hard love and no mercy. He had brought Visenia along on Caraxes, for half a day flying, even as she wailed and fought, but he wouldn't yield. It was for her own good. She'd screamed and screamed, until she'd screamed herself to silence, a change which his stepfather took as an improvement at the time. So the next day, he'd made Visenia go with Luke as he trained with Arrax, and even made her sit with Thunderstrike within the den. In theory, Jace understood what Daemon had been trying to do, but at 3 years old, Visenia simply didn't understand "you're a Targaryen" as a reason. Babes didn't respond to politics or family traditions or her heritage, or understand any of it. They acted according to instinct, and her instincts feared the dragons. Until then, Visenia had been rather ahead of the curve compared to some of her age mates, being able to walk and form sentences at 2 years old, counting, running and climbing soon after. She was well behaved and never excessively loud the way Joff was. Visenia enjoyed chatter in her own way, of birds, flowers, stones and shells. But then suddenly, after Daemon's attempt to cure her fear of dragons, she was crawling instead of walking. She would soil herself and even throw poop at a very shocked Lady Alinda. She'd rather babble, make indistinguishable sounds and point to communicate, instead of talking the way they perfectly well knew she could. The rapid deterioration was alarming, and his mother's reaction had been terrible. If Cyrex had been inside the castle, in the room they rode for hours, the dragon may very well have eaten Daemon. Rhaena had went with Septa Mecca to care for Visenia, whilst Jace invited Helena out for a very long stroll along the beach, hoping she hadn't heard much. Who knew what she may write home about? When they returned, his mother had an announcement ready, and made her will clear over a very stilted dinner. Visenia was no longer to be around dragons, not to visit, not to push or talk about it. Even the princess's bedtime stories were now of knights and ladies instead of dragon lords of old Valyria. And their mother had made the decision to send Thunderstrike alongside Mourning to be fostered under Hagrid's care too, despite the sanctuary still being a work in progress at the time. A clean break. Daemon had sulked for weeks, defensive about his role in it, insisting Visenia's squeamishness for dragons would fester unless they got a handle of it early, as had shown to happen with a handful of former Targaryens. One even ended up a fucking maester! But his mother stood firm against her husband's objections, and even if it didn't happen overnight, Visenya got better. With Thunderstrike fostered at Hagrid's, their hopes was that Visenya, young as she was, would forget her bad experiences, as most young children forgot their toddler years. Jay certainly couldn't remember anything from when he was 2 or 3. Distance would not make the hearts grow fonder, but perhaps the reintroduction at an older age would suit her better. Chase prayed the expectations were met, because otherwise, what would happen if they didn't? Ariel. You have a gift for seeing the patterns differently than I do. Please read mine, Helena. What do you make of it? Ariel handed over her teacup with Unfogging the Future propped up on the table, opened to the chapter on Testamency. Helena twisted the cup in her hand, ignoring the sharp-eyed ladies and royals watching in uncertain curiosity. This had to be the longest hour in Ariel's life. Her tea party was crashing and burning, and Ariel was getting desperate. So desperate, she'd even brought up divination as a topic of discussion. Her! It spoke volumes of how dire it was. Wouldn't it be fun if we could use it to see whether I am having a boy or a girl? The question sounded stilted to her own ears. If only she could turn back time and just cancel the tea. Excuse it on dizziness, which wouldn't even be a lie. After everything, bringing Bela to attend this stupid social event was asking for a scene. She'd all but trapped the hurt Dragon Rider into interacting with the source of her ire. And more still, not only Princess Rhaenyra, but Queen Alicent, Helena, the Wilds, Lady Alinda Massey, and a handful more prominent ladies attending Aemon's name day. One wrong move and this would get explosive. Harold didn't want Bela to tackle her stepmother on her lawn. It would be such a big scandal. To add to the discomfort, her baby was wide awake. It could only be doing what Harold guessed were stretching exercises. Fully, like a starfish, clearing away her organs to make space. So much her bump was flattening out. Were they doing yoga in there? Such specifics escape me. I still see naught but the animal in your cup, Helena said, peering between the teacup and Ariel's belly. I've dreamt of it too, an antlered dragon. You have a playful imagination, sweetling, Alicent said fondly, if a bit worldly. At the same time as she used any opportunity to be as close to Helena as possible, she seemed to have really missed her. Alicent had not failed to notice the tension, and was unbalanced by the differences too. The Queen didn't seem to know the dynamic in the room anymore. Ariel couldn't help her out, she didn't either. Antlers? Like a stag's? Ariel asked, a little breathy from the aches. She stroked down her stomach, wishing the baby would fall asleep soon. Helena agreed with a nod. Inviting them was courting disaster. How had she missed it? Was her pregnancy brain that severe? When Elisa suggested she arrange something to entertain the ladies, she just said yes, without thinking through on what it meant to invite all the ladies to a garden party. Seeing Bela arrive after Rhaenyra made her stomach plummet, or her baby kicked out at least. But as they'd been drawing their chairs, tense and awkward, it struck Ariel rather suddenly that wasn't all. Alicent was Rhaenyra's stepmother. Rhaenyra was Bela's stepmother. Lady Wilde was Grace's stepmother. And Ariel had the brilliant idea to invite all these inflamed relations to tea whilst knowing all of them were amidst their personal brands of family drama. Why didn't she just invite Jasper Wilde's pregnant mistress to tea too? The stony front from Bela was positively frigid, whilst Princess Rhaenyra responded somewhere between confused and suspicious. She could hardly fail to notice. It's not that Bela refused to respond to a direct address, or even said anything mean. She just acted as ordered. But her cordialness had gone away. Harold didn't hold that against her when Bela had good reasons to feel slighted and discarded. But at the same time, it made the tea very awkward. There'd been a few attempts to start discussions, but bringing up Lady Wilde's pregnancy made her cry, whilst Grace became defensive of her father. Trying to switch topic to whatever Alicent wanted made her assume it was an open invitation to push Valyrian baby names again. In a rising sense of panic, Harryl sent Elisa off for reinforcements, though she hadn't yet returned. Where was she? This tentative peace only had to hold until Elisa came back. It'd be too distracting, and after that, there was no way any of these ladies would end up in a catfight. She'd not have their infighting overshadow Aemon's knighting and the success of his 16th name day, because all everyone would remember in the years to come was how Lady Bela broke Princess Rhaenyra's nose. Harryl hoped they'd resolve this, somehow get better. But here and now wasn't the time. Not with this audience, who'd make sure the juicy gossip was spread from the Wall to Planky Town within a fortnight. Which is why she turned to Helena and divination, of all things. But it had been the most neutral topic. With their visit to the point, these ladies were growing more accepting and curious of magic. It was a tentative thing, a blend of disbelief and excitement, making them generally wonder if maybe Helena could see the future in the cup. It was easier for them to believe that here, under the roof of a wizard like Hagrid, than at home. The fact the king had an interest in divination only added more patience for it. More in them than Harryl normally had for the topic herself, actually. What do you think it could mean? Harryl spoke to the table of ladies at large, inviting more to join in. Rhaenyra exchanged a look with her lady-in-waiting. If I was to buy into these magics, which still seem unorthodox, dreams don't happen in cups, though what can it hurt? It could have several interpretations. After all, the stag is a symbol of... She trailed off. Many arguable things. And it's the sigil of House Baratheon too. But an antlered dragon? Harryl frowned, and then she thought of someone who could actually fit into that. Is it about Princess Rhaenys? She's half Targaryen and half Baratheon. Maybe she'll come visit us soon. And just like that, Harryl once more put her foot in her mouth. Oh hell. At the mere naming of the Lady of Driftmark, Princess Rhaenyra's willingness to play along faded into damning silence, becoming distant as she took a sip of her tea. No, Bela huffed, breaking the tension by exchanging it for another sword. Harryl asked, wary of welcoming her input. It's not that she wanted to exclude Bela, but Harryl knew how hot her temper ran, how raw and exposed and sad she'd been. Could Harryl's short-sighted arrangement make it unravel here? You presume too much from very little. Firstly, House Baratheon isn't the only house with stags on their coat of arms. Though they're the most prominent, Helena said quietly. There's House Bollings, House Wessingtons, and if it's just antlers, there's House Buckwall and House Hearts too. Bela sounded forcefully calm but reasonable, even though she was talking to Helena now. Helena, another person rather low on Bela's list, though maybe her years at court had changed her opinion about more than Rhaenyra and her father. Besides, why would my grandmother be represented as a male? Harryl tilted her head. Male? Bela placed her cup down with a clatter. A stag is male, whilst a doe is female. Yes, Helena agreed, taking another check on the cup again. You're speaking of antlers, but a doe doesn't have antlers. Only stags are born to wear such crowns in ways does by birth can't. So mayhaps it's an indication of its sex. It's a boy, Bela said. It almost seems she answered your question, Harryl. Her guess is an antlered dragon. A male dragon. A boy. Harryl and Helena locked eyes, something like agreement ringing between them. It could be, Harryl murmured, fingers tapping across her bump. It was out of her hands. What would come, but at the same time, she had hoped for a girl. A girl would be easier. A girl child would be something she knew how to handle better than boy children. A girl would not be seen as a contender by others. It came with different challenges, but it also meant a girl would be safer. Yet at the same time, Ariel had a habit of calling her baby him. I once dreamt my child had black hair and 2 colored eyes. She laughed awkwardly, instantly regretting her line of talk. Did that sound stupid? It did, didn't it? But she was half on the horse, so Ariel rushed through the rest. And though I never quite figured the sex, they were holding a stag toy. I remember that. We'll soon know, Lady Elinda said with a lilt of excitement. She had no children of her own, but yet knew better what to expect than Ariel did. She helped deliver Joffrey, Visenya, Viserys, Emma and Rhaenys for Rhaenyra, and adores them all like her own. That is something we could bet over. Bella peered speculatively at Ariel. A gold dragon on you having a son, with dark hair. I bet 20 gold dragons, Rhaenyra challenged her stepdaughter. That her babe has Ariel's hair, and what you said of the eyes too. Curious you dreamed such, or mayhaps you heard before you fell asleep that my grandmother, Alyssa Targaryen, had 2 colored eyes as well. Bella's smirk fell away. Alicent fidgeted. Please now, gambling isn't proper. Oh, it's but fun and games, my queen, Lady Caswell said. If we're all taking bets, then I bet it's a boy too, born in the image of his father, with silver hair and Prince Aemon's eyes. I think it's a girl, Lady Grey said. With Ariel's eyes and Aemon's hair, she'll be a gorgeous little Princess Lily. Ariel perked up, glancing to Grace. That was so kind. She was of the few who didn't mock her or talk down about Ariel's preferred name. Grace returned a smile with a friendly wink, even as the Queen's lips pinched and Bella shook her head. What about you, Lady Ariel? What do you think the sex will be? Grace's stepmother asked, pushing listlessly on her piece of cake with a spoon. The impending mother was 6 years older than Grace, the same number of years she'd been married to Lord Jasper, though those years seemed to have taken a toll. At halfway through her 4th pregnancy, but with only 1 living child, the once vivacious maiden looked 15 years older than her stepdaughter. I hoped for a girl, Ariel admitted. I know better what to expect there, but I'm starting to think... Ariel stopped there, perking up at the sound of barking. Finally! Craning her neck, Ariel could see Alyssa and Kennelmaster Corp making their way through the courtyard with reinforcements, their arms filled with wiggling, impatient little puppies. Is that... puppies! Grace nearly jolted out of her seat. Eee! She squealed. Look at them! They're adorable! The puppies were 6 weeks old. They would grow into hunting dogs of Castle Point under Kennelmaster Corp's expertise, but for now they were just soft, snuggly and playful, and excellent distractions. Do you wish to meet them? Ariel asked the group, as if it was accidental that Alyssa and the Kennelmaster happened to walk by with their arms loaded with cute baby animals. Mayhaps I can interrupt to see if any of you are interested in saying hello? Even if only half of them responded half as exuberantly as Grace, she'd take it as a win. It worked. Her husband found Ariel boneless on their bed that afternoon, wide awake but exhausted. They acknowledged each other with looks. Ariel with a dead stare indicating how draining her day was, and Aemond arched a brow in a silent, "That bad, eh?" He stripped out of his sweat-drenched clothes and went into the bathroom to wash. Head on a soft pillow, back getting some rest from the weight, Ariel intended to not move an inch for the remains of the day. Honestly, she would have preferred playing fetch with Fluffy the three-headed dog than invite the ladies for tea again. The former would be safer. How did she end up here? Ariel wondered, dealing with all this nonsense that never seemed to improve. She cared for them, but bloody hell, they were like squirrels on a wheel, running rapidly in circles, growing more and more tired without getting anywhere. In another life, one where she never left Hogwarts, she'd have no such stress in her life. Ariel would be in her 7th year, soon to graduate. Her future worries weren't about successions or injustices or a collapsing family her child might be born into, but where to apply for a job. Maybe she'd be working with Hagrid's animals somehow. Or could she work in a shop in Diagon Alley? She'd never forget Hagrid taking her there at her 11th birthday. It was so whimsically magical there, with the crooked streets and curious shops and a sensory overload of the best sorts. She could work in the Quidditch shop, Ariel thought. Flying. Hadn't Ron said something about teams? Maybe she'd have tried out for that. If she had kept at Quidditch, trained hard at it, maybe she would have gotten good enough to fly after snitches for a living. Other than that, Hagrid didn't know what sort of jobs wizards and witches did. She'd never asked Hagrid that, though surely it had to be easier than being stuck coaxing a room full of politically sharp-eyed ladies through tea to a peaceful end. While in the wizarding world, everyone had magic to fix everything, which would take the pressure off her. There was a lot she lost, but there were certain things that made it worth it too. Ariel rested her hand on her stomach, humming quietly until Aemond returned, clean and damp and light on his feet in ways Ariel hadn't been in months. "Did you have fun sparring?" she asked while Aemond pulled on her shift. It's been a while since I tested against Sir Kristen." "Who won?" she prodded. "It was merely a spar. You look worn. Are you well?" She took his quick change of topic to mean Sir Kristen had been victorious then. "I am ready for this to be over," she stressed meaningfully, unsure if she meant the pregnancy more than the prolonged visit of the royal court. It was a toss-up. Either would be a load off her back. "I miss being able to cross the courtyard without getting short of breath. And I swear, each day I wake up with a new type of funny pain. I really wish I could bend down to pet puppies, but I can't. My balance is all out of center, and I can barely see my toes anymore." She wiggled them for emphasis, not that she could see more than her boobs and bum when she looked down. "Are they still there?" Aemond chuckled as he climbed up on the bed and lay down. He propped himself on his side and rested a hand on her stomach, expecting to feel the baby moving. Her little yoga stretcher had fallen asleep though. "It'll be over soon," Ariel insisted. "Surely. It's only so long anyone can be so uncomfortable." Aemond hummed agreeably. "I do hope to meet Archieharris James," Ariel corrected. "Or Alyssane?" "Lily," she nodded sagely. "Very soon," Aemond huffed, and she could tell he was biting back some choice reactions, torn between calling her an idiot or leave it at an eye roll. He went with the former, so they can tell their mother how inferior her name suggestions are in person. "Then I wish you good fortune in the wars to come," Ariel murmured. "Fine. To spare us the outfall and strive for further battles, would you be willing to negotiate a draw?" Aemond said, thumb stroking over her stomach. She hummed, wondering what he was up to now. "Settle for a draw? You presume I wouldn't fight to full victory on behalf of my own child?" Aemond's eyes danced. "Considering the cost to the subjects, Ariel, I come bearing generous terms." Ariel sighed theatrically. "Let's hear it then. What of Lily-san?" Ariel blinked. Lily-san. She tried the name slowly. "A blend of our preferences." He nodded. That could work. She had nothing against the name Lily-san, and it meant she could call her Lily in private. "That's a wonderful name for our girl," Ariel said softly, heart bursting with warmth. She picked up his hand, fingers intertwining. "You'd agree to Lily-san?" He nodded. "I would." Ariel could work with Lily-san. It may have been closer to British if there wasn't an S in there, if it was Liliane. But either way it could work. Probably. All this name talk had uprooted her previous surety, making her revalue her options in a different light. Before anything was set in stone, there was another alternative she hadn't even brought up to him. "Oh, besides Lily-san, what do you think of the name Ruby?" Eamon's mouth opened in stunned silence, judging her sincerity, and then he slumped, groaning back into the cushion.
"You're impossible."
"You're one to talk?" Ariel flushed. Alright, so changing her mind now may not have been the most tactful. She hadn't truly changed her opinion. It was just a fact. Hagrid had a wonderful name too, and imagining how happy he'd be if she named her child after him would be worth it for that alone. Though people have been speaking with me, making their opinions clear, most seem to say I'm being unreasonable about the name, particularly James. "I warned you it would sound strange to them," he said flatly. "Did my mother talk you around then?" She tried. Ariel didn't want to think of what the Queen had said. It never failed to make her upset. For two people in perfect agreement, it was notable how differently Alicent and Bella talked of their name preferences. The Queen approached the topic like a mother whose children had been rejected by their father, and with that as her experience, advised Ariel on how to avoid sharing in that fate. Even when the father being discussed was her own son, she talked as if it was not just possible, but expected. What did she think of Aemond? That he wouldn't love his child? Ariel had held her composure, but barely, because it pissed her off. On behalf of her child, for herself, and for Aemond. While Bella discussed the matter from a more reasonable standpoint, from the angle of having to deal with court, and the loneliness and exposed life she had to deal with for her to be so damn worried over a name. Ariel didn't know which was sadder. Bella's maturity was startling, but the anger and resentment that come with was heartbreaking and rather concerning. While the Queen had all but said Viserys hadn't shown an interest in his children, and maybe Ariel wouldn't have gotten so angry if a part of her didn't believe her, but she knew. She'd seen it for years. The king tolerated his sons and younger daughter like he tolerated court. That didn't make it love. The king was rich in wealth, easy with his generosity, and all around practiced in buying affections instead of earning them, but greedy with his heart. Had Viserys ever truly shared it with anyone? There were times she wondered if even Rhaenyra held it, or if she too was yet another someone Viserys found easier to buy into compliance than actually having to deal with her. He didn't seem able to come up with any solutions that stuck, not unless that solution could be bought. That worked for a broken wheel on a carriage, but not a broken family. Otherwise it remained a problem, a festering issue that never went away. So he shut himself with his model and pretended it didn't exist, and ordered everyone to follow his example. It seemed rather juvenile. But Hale couldn't forget he was old and sick, and weak, and that made him ineffective. All that was true, and all the worse when he remained the king. In the end, the only one Viserys fully protected from consequences was himself. You're more agreeable than I've heard you yet, Aemond mused. My mother must have had some effect. Bella discussed it with me afterwards, Ariel said. She made a better case. His dubious side-eye made it clear he didn't believe that in the slightest. That was his own earned judgment. He'd never be reasonable about Bella, which was stupidly narrow-minded, when even Aegon seemed to have recognized what her husband refused to acknowledge. That Bella was more than merely Daemon's daughter. I truly love the name James. It's not only about my parents. It feels right. He feels like a James. Almost more than a daughter feels like a Lily. I'd have to meet her first to be sure of any name at all, but this one? It was different, because it truly felt like she'd already seen him. Her? By now it almost didn't matter. James seemed like the right answer regardless of gender. Not that she'd start breaching the topic of naming a girl James. Even she knew that it'd be dead out of the water.
"They'll never be the same as your parents," Eamon said. "He'll be his own person. I want to meet him and get to know for myself." You still keep saying he, Eamon noted. She shrugged. "Helena thinks it's a boy too." "She does." Eamon smiled. "That's interesting. She has a hunch for these things, my sister." "She wasn't alone," Ariel said. "Bella thought so too, and Lady Caswell." "Lucky guesses," he dismissed for the latter two. "But say it's a boy. Is Jaehaerys that different?" Eamon asked. "I prefer it for my own reasons, but a happy coincidence is how it's not that dissimilar to James. How could one sound so much lesser to you?" "I could ask you the same," Ariel said pointedly, but she knew what he was getting at. "Jaehaerys is good. I do think it's a fine name. Not a little, because with Jaehaerys, I could still call him James." "As a nickname?" "It works," Ariel insisted, tasting the names on her tongue, hearing how it sounded aloud. How James could be the nickname of Jaehaerys and struck her before too, but the timing left it unspoken. It had happened in the middle of a pretty heated argument. Suggesting Jaehaerys was similar had felt paramount to admitting Aemond had the slightest point, and he'd been so bloody infuriating that day. The day was a new day, a day closer to birth, and their child needed a name, preferably one they both were pleased with, maybe all three. If Ned can be a nickname of Edric, why can't James be a nickname of Jaehaerys? She speculated. Aemond considered it, even as his smile crept over his face. "Good," he said, growing pleased as a kitten, almost purring with his satisfaction. "It's decided. We both like it, we'll use it. He'll be named Jaehaerys." No, now that was too presumptuous, even for Aemond. "I said I liked it, not that I agree. Even as his full name, it's just so kingly." "All I hear is further arguments for why it's perfect." "There's many other great options besides Jaehaerys," Ariel said, seeing what was happening. He thought he'd won, she could tell. The confident aura was radiating across his face now. "Such as James, Lenor, or Rubius are good names on their own too." "What happened to not name the babe with options already occupied?" he teased. Fine. She reached over, catching a lock of his damp hair. She twirled the silver around her finger. "For Ruby is a good option for a girl too. Not only because of Hagrid, it's also the name of rubies. Red and fiery. Like Gryffindor. Like your house. You put it everywhere. It's all but the official gemstone of House Targaryen." Aemond smirked. "For a non-Valyrian name, Ruby is one of your better suggestions. Mayhaps it could work." "Yes?" she asked, pleased, only for the uncertainty to overcome her again. "But Lisanne could also work." Aemond kissed her, shutting her up. "Here's where we are. Jaehaerys or Lisanne. They can't have both. We're only having one. That merely means we'll have options in reserve for the next one." Ariel stopped. Excuse him? Next one? Not immediately. "You think?" Ariel asked in a deadpan. "I'm a bit occupied growing the first one, Aemond. What if you turn this one into a disaster?" "We'll have practice in what to avoid then," Aemond said, Fox casualness. "But unless we're exceptionally unfortunate, Jaehaerys will have siblings one day." "You're so bloody presumptuous." Aemond laughed, infuriatingly pleased as he fell back on the cushions. "Jaehaerys, It could work. Aemon's Jaehaerys, the realm's Jaehaerys. But more importantly, it seemed a reasonable way he could also stay her James. It was a few days later when Harriel awoke early, wide awake. After months of a growing list of discomforts and weariness, waking up to a burst of energy was a treat. Harriel heaved herself out of bed, somehow not stirring Aemond awake, and got ready in the dusky darkness of pre-sunrise. Through the windows, she watched the ocean gently lapping against the cliffside, and the only creature awake was a lonesome seagull. Harriel left their apartments, trotting through the fangs until she reached the kitchen. "My, good morning, Lady Harriel. What brings you to my kitchen before the crowing of the rooster? Is the babe restless?" "Good morning, Ebbert," Harriel greeted the baker, setting together ingredients for a quick breakfast from the pantry. "I woke early. Do you need my assistance this morning?" "Certainly not, my lady." Ebbert shook his head. "I've baked my whole life, and my old kitchen didn't have a tenth of the tools this one does, or direct access to water. Even serving the royal court, I don't know what to do with half my time. No. "My apologies," Harriel hurried to say. "I didn't mean to insinuate you couldn't do it out. Everyone has requested second and third pieces of your pies, and there's never a crumb of bread left on the plates when you serve it." The cakes may have been a bit dry, but he'd get better with practice. Growing up at Port Point, Ebbert hadn't had access to excess honey, sugar and berries that he could get his hands on locally, as well as practiced at sweet pastries. Still, Ebbert had a natural knack for pies, and his cakes were improving with each attempt. "I'm merely restless. I'd like to be useful today." She really did. "Please, my lady, you should eat up, and if you and the little one is hungry for more, I'll have the first batches of bread ready within the hour. Go sit, eat, and I'll have the boy bring it out." Ebbert ushered her out of his kitchen, and though Harriel tried to sit, she was up and about within 5 minutes, feeling an urge to clean. She could clean their apartments? Would Aemond mind? Or Hagrid? But they were both asleep at this hour. No, she'd do the Great Hall. It was only fair she'd give the staff a hand, as they'd been doing really well despite how many guests were about. With her magic, cleaning the hall took 15 minutes though, including washing the windows, and Harriel was on a roll. She was so productive today, and she was giddy with accomplishment and the neatness. Unlike Aunt Petunia, here people were actually thankful when she helped out. The staircases were getting dusty by the increased number of inhabitants, and she went over those, climbing from the bottom of the fangs to the top of the point. Slowly, and with her wand-free hands gripping the railing. She may have energy this morning, but her balance remained screwed. She went to tackle the kennels next, but got chased out by a grumpy kennelmaster Kolb. He wasn't much of a morning person, it seemed. Though it was also starting to feel inadequate. Cleaning was only a temporary fix. She wasn't ready. As far as they'd gotten with Castle Point, there were several neglected corners left untouched, simply without time to complete it. Rooms left bare, parts of the garden unplanted. For lacking railing on the courtyard deck, a child could fall right off that. It wasn't finished enough, and her baby could come any day now. Harriel passed Bela and Aegon on their way to break their fast in the Great Hall. They halted when Harriel took a momentary break, leaning against the wall. "Are you well?" Bela asked. Harriel waved her away. "I'm fine, Bela. Just a babe." She sent them along and continued on in the opposite direction, a plan in mind. Which is how Rhaenyra tracked her down half an hour later, in full renovation mood in an abandoned round chamber on the second floor of the Fangs. The princess stopped in the doorway. "What are you doing, Lady Harriel?" She took a curious look over what was slowly becoming a pumpkin-themed playroom. The chamber was already round, and Harriel was making it curve in towards the ceiling, making the room look like it was actually the inside of a pumpkin. It would need a swing too, a playpen. It needed to have secure windows so no one tried climbing out. "It's a playroom," Harriel answered. "For the children to play in." Rhaenyra nodded slowly, taking a jerky step back as Harriel curved in the wall.
Is this urgent? Ariel suddenly remembered who this was and what her rank demanded, and her wand lowered at once. My apologies, Princess. I don't know where my head went. I was so caught up. How may I be of service? Rhaenyra shook her head. I don't need anything, Ariel. I came to inform you that my party will be taking their leave today. We'll be breaking our fast and packing up, and then we will fly home. Already? Ariel said, even as she nodded. She'd known they wouldn't stay long. Yes. Hagrid will be sailing to Dragonstone to transport Lunexis at a later time. He doesn't wish to leave in case the birth starts whilst he's away. Yes, he wants to be here, Ariel agreed. We'll be sad to see you go. I'm glad you and Jason and Helena were able to see the point. I hope you'll stop by another time, even if it's just for tea. Ariel sighed. I know things are not ideal between Aemond and your sons. However, for me it was nice to see Jace again, and I'd like to see Luke too, to see how much Joff and Visenya have grown. A little Viserys too. I haven't seen him since he was a babe. He must have gotten so big by now. How is he? Viserys is well, Rhaenyra said, twisting a ring on her finger. I'll send Luke and Rhaenyra for a visit. They'll want to see the point too, she assured. After the babe is born though. In fact, maybe you should spare your energy, Ariel. You'll need it for the delivery. She glanced around the room. I don't know what magic that was, but it can wait. Your babe will not need such accommodations for moons, possibly years for some of this. Thank you for the concern, Princess, but I feel well. Yes, expecting mothers often do when their time is near at hand. How do you mean? When my labors loomed near, I noticed I have an urge to prepare. It may start a couple days before the delivery, though with Joffrey I was doing it for nearly a fortnight leading up to his delivery. There's a need to get everything ready, clean and safe and prepared. My midwives call it nesting. Don't overexert yourself though. This energy is a boon, but it may also be your body giving you a moment's levity before the true effort starts. Nesting? Ariel repeated. I merely want to get this done. We've been building so much for so long, divided between so many points. There are corners like these we simply didn't get to. Though I always intend... Ariel lurched back with a startled gasp. Well then, Rhaenyra said, amused. Your labors have already started, Ariel. She was right. Her water just broke. Now? I must give birth today? Her wand had tumbled out of her hand, and Ariel looked longingly down to where it rolled away. How was she supposed to bend down to pick it back up? Rhaenyra gave her such a knowing look, and kindly picked it up for her, giving Ariel time to panic. But I didn't finish! The playroom isn't done! She'd been so impatient, but now it was here, imminent. Everything she'd learned fled her mind, and only a jumble of bloody hell, this will hurt, remained clear within her head. Should she go get Aemond? Hagrid? No, Maester Erwin? Dora the midwife? Elisa? Oh hells! The baby was coming! She was going to have a baby! Bloody hell, this was going to be bloody! And a hell! Come along, Ariel. I'll be escorting you back to your apartment where you'll change into a shift, the princess said, professional like she was guiding courtiers, while Ariel's mind kept spiraling in circles. I'm getting the maester and the midwives. I just saw your husband in the Great Hall, and he will be informed too. Everyone will. But that's none of your concern. You will do this, Ariel. As you say, she conceded, voice small. At least one of them knew what they were doing. Ariel had probably been in labor all morning, with weaker contractions coming and going. Though Ariel had been suffering an increasing number of discomforts for months now, and for a change, she'd awoken unusually energized. What was one more strange discomfort? It had been like period cramps. It wouldn't stay that way. Labor, a single contraction, wasn't the worst pain of her life, but a different way of pain than she'd come across before. A single injury had a start and an end. A stubbed toe, a fall and burst of pain in the knee. It was a flaring heat, then it went numb, then gone. While labor was just ongoing, increasing in intensity and not elevating. A labor contraction was a tight squeeze, leaving her unable to breathe, whilst feeling as if she might vomit and need a privy simultaneously. There was pain low around her hips, while her hands and feet tingled. It could get so overwhelming she could concentrate on nothing else whilst attempting not to fall down. The real main enemy was the consistency, the growing intensity. As the hours passed, the space between hits just kept growing smaller and smaller. More pain, but with less respite between hits. Like stubbing your toe again and again and again, faster and faster. But it wasn't her toe being stubbed. It was her womb, her hips, her back. And throughout there were visitors too. Hagrid heard first. "I was on my way to see the dragons, but I was stopped by the door," Hagrid said. "How are you? Is there anything I can do?" "No, I think it's still early." "What about water?" Hagrid asked. "Are you thirsty?" Ariel nodded. "Actually, yes. I mean, no, not drink, but could you refill all the buckets, the tub, with clean water? I want everyone able to watch properly throughout this, myself included." Hagrid nodded. The door swung open and Aemond marched in. "I heard. How do you fare?" Before she could respond, his eyes set on Maester Irvin. "What does she need?" "Lady Ariel's water broke, and she started her labors, but not quite ready to start pushing. It could be a while yet. These things are hard to predict, Prince Aemond," Irvin said, looking at Aemond's feet while fidgeting with his sleeves. "Dora and Elisa are helping me," Ariel said. "What to do, what to expect, what can help?" "How do you feel?" "Scared?" No, she didn't say that. Instead, she swallowed. "No way but through, isn't there? You can do this." He placed a hand on her stomach. "Go easy on your mother, Jaehaerys." "James," she added, then looked up, clutching to his arm as another contraction hit. She caught her breath as it faded, while Aemond was stony as he only got one out of his depth. For someone who preferred having plans, or at least be able to predict how things would go, he couldn't do anything here. Ariel would gladly have allowed him to birth their baby in her stead, but the way of the world just wasn't fair that way. "We have her, my prince," Elisa said. "We'll be looking after her, but if anything changes, you'll be the first informed." Aemond hummed, displeased. "How long will she be like this? It seems... Should you sit down now? Spare your energy for the delivery?" Ariel shook her head. "The walking helps the birth along." "Not if you fall over." "I have to." There was no other choice. This had to go well. Rhaenyra had done this 6 times and survived each one. Ariel knew women who'd given birth to 10 children, 12. She'd heard of one who had 17. And even with all these successes, there were so many that went horribly. So much could go wrong. But Ariel had to do her part. The alternative was... She'd seen how Laena died. Even her baby died, leaving only grief. No, she would not die. It would go well, for both herself and her baby. "It's her labors. It's rough. You wouldn't handle it," her midwife Dora said without blinking. Emmett gave the woman an affronted scowl, while Harriel burst out giggling, her confidence over her choice of help skyrocketing. She didn't know Dora as well as she did Eliza, but no women in Port Point had delivered more babies than her either, and clearly she wasn't intimidated by pressure if she'd been bold enough to say that to a prince. "I love you." Harriel squeezed his arm. "You keep the guests distracted, won't you?" "I don't give a twit about the vultures right now, Harriel." Emmett kissed her cheek. "I love you too. I'm but down the hall." "With Hagrid?" "Yes," he said. "If there's anything." She nodded. Emmett left, and Harriel labored on, pacing their apartments and balcony. Though Harriel wasn't a moment alone. Eliza was keeping her company by sharing tales of her own experience birthing her children, or the time she'd helped her sister through a birth. Dora was ready with advice according to how things proceeded, guiding Harriel onto a balance between coaxing things along with walking, and when a rest or nourishment was needed to keep her strength up. Maester Irvin came and went like clockwork every half hour or so, and in between more faces showed up. Bella came to wish her well with a bouquet of flowers she displayed in the window. Harriel recognized them. The gardener would be so annoyed Bella plucked his favorites. There weren't many of them, and they'd been slow to grow. Then Helena and Queen Alicent paid a visit, the Queen taking close stock of her progress, straightening out all the sheets, and making sure to send for extra water, just in case. It was meant well, but Harriel was relieved when they left. They were followed by Lady Alinda, who came carrying a goblet of juiced berries, saying liquids were better during labor than solids, which Dora agreed with. Even Lady Grace came by for a chat, talking mostly of puppies, before Helena snuck back in for a second visit, without her mother now. She didn't speak much, but held her hand during a few contractions, and then braided her hair to keep it out of the way. It was only women allowed in, because birthing was a woman's affair in Westeros. Even Maester Irvin was more the guest assist compared to her chief midwife Dora. The only exception to female visitors was Aemon sporadically showing up in the doorway, peeking its head in to ask how she was faring and if anything had changed. At first it seemed considerate. He was just impatient and worried. But as the morning passed to noon, passed to evening, passed to night, while Harriel's energy drained and her insides were getting torn, stretched and bruised up, she was trembling while everything seemed exhausting, even his stupid face asking for the millionth time how she was doing. Oh, just peachy! What did he think? Gosh, he was never touching her again! Then, at long fucking last... You're ready, milady, Dora said. It's time to push. Alisa's drooping eyes blinked back into full alertness. I'm fetching Mr. Irvin. I'll be back in a heartbeat, my lady. Mr. Irvin came with the brewing dawn. Settling into the bed, Harriel cast a glance out the window, a vague memory of waking up refreshed and energized at this hour the previous day. Oh God, she was to push now? Yes, she did. A little longer, and it would be done. One last effort and she'd be able to stop. She'd have her baby. Dora was an experienced midwife, but she'd never delivered a baby for a witch. Even her steely composure began cracking at the odd things happening within the room. Her scream joining with Harriel's when one of the buckets with water began steaming and boiling, and Mr. Irvin fell over when a mug shattered. At least Eliza was there. It's her lady's magic. She's in pain. She's not doing it with purpose, Eliza told Dora and Mr. Irvin. Ignore it and do your duty as she's doing hers, or if you cannot, fetch Hagrid, the prince. At least they can handle a delivery where a midwife and maester fails their purposes. Harriel couldn't mind how she was traumatizing the muggles, breathing like she couldn't catch her breath, and a baby pushing through her. Harriel had no mind for anything else. Push, milady, Eliza urged. And Harriel pushed. Then Irvin was back, composure in check, with Dora a step behind him. You're doing good, my lady, Dora said. For the next, give it your all. Ariel wheezed with the efforts. The curtains had been yanked off their poles and were floating along the ceiling, like some flower-patterned imitation of Casper the Ghost. Fucking hell! Get out! Get out with you! So of course, the door to her apartments evaporated entirely. Push, Ariel. For a last time, she put in her all, pushing with a ragged shout. And he came. Ariel collapsed back on the bed, trembling, whilst her ears rang with the baby's cry. He's here, my lady! Look, you did it! You did it! She gasped, tears and sweat running down her cheek from the exertion. Eliza was helping Mr. Irvin cut her umbilical cord, whilst Dora held up her baby with a shell-shocked smile. You did so well, Eliza nodded. Ariel stared, startled at the wiggling, wailing, bloody child in her arms. It really was a boy. Such a small and frail little creature. She'd done it! Free of the cord, Dora dabbed the worst of the goo away with a cloth and brought him over. Hi, James, Ariel whispered as she finally held him. She'd waited so long for him. He took a slight break from his cries, eyes blinking blearily up at her. Already she could make out the two hues. She laughed, tears welling up in her again. How she'd missed him. It didn't make sense. How could she meet someone for the first time yet be reunited? But she had. He was finally here. I missed you. She cradled his soft head, smelling his skin, holding him to her chest for warmth and trying to comfort him. It had to be rough, being expelled from the warm, enclosed world he knew to light and air and sounds. It was a brand new world for him. James had a tuft of dark hair that would grow into an unruly black mess. One eye that would become as green as hers and the other purple. His features were not yet as distinct as they'd grow into, but already Ariel recognized James's pouting lower face. That frown between bursts of cries, the way his lips said, "That was the same as Eamon's, all right." James whimpered, displeased like a cat that had survived quite a tumble in a bathtub, and looking just like his father as he did. I know, Ariel cooed. This is a lot to take in, I know. Congratulations. You did wonderfully, Lady Ariel, Irvin said. Isn't he beautiful? Ariel marveled, thumb soothing over his soft head. He was red, warm and wrinkly, but here, with his mouth and nose and tiny hands and smaller fingers, the toes so small. She didn't feel pain anymore, tired and beaten, but wide awake, alert beyond exertion. A long arm sneaked over her shoulders. Without looking away from James, she recognized him by smell and feel when Eamon climbed on the bed and fitted him into his side. Mindfully, he reached for James, stroking over his head and down to hold the red, wrinkly hand between his fingers. The baby's hand was impossibly dwarfed in comparison. Ariel peered at Eamon, exchanging amazed smiles. She didn't want to give him up, but could feel something was bearing down. Take him, she told Eamon. Wash him, give him a blanket. The afterbirth is coming, my prince, Dora warned him, almost obstinate. It might be she took professional offense to Eliza's words and was determined to pretend it never happened, even though the bucket kept steaming behind her. At least it wasn't boiling anymore. Eamon picked up his son for the first time, but when James began wriggling, there was a tense moment as he adjusted. Mind his head, James can't yet... I've got him, Eamon assured her, securing his hold by bringing him close. Shh, he soothed. Besides the mess, Ariel hardly felt the afterbirth. too occupied watching how James was faring, only looking away to spell away the mess while Elisa helped Eamon wash their son and wrap him in a fresh blanket. James stopped crying in exchange for tight little hiccups when Elisa put him back in Eamon's arms. There was a knock on the wall next to the doorless doorway, and Hagrid entered. The mere sight of him made her tear up with happiness. She had no idea why. She was just so happy. Relieved? Hagrid beamed straight at Ariel as he walked as quietly as he could into the chamber, which was anything but subtle for a man his size.
I'm sorry. I promise I won't stay long. I heard the baby crying and I just wanted to see how you were. If you want me to go.
No. Eamon shook his head. Come meet our son, Hagrid. Hagrid's mouth wobbled.
It's a boy?
Mm-hmm. Eamon tilted his hold so Hagrid would see him properly. Hagrid, meet Jaehaerys Targaryen.
What? Look at the tiny little bow truckle. Have you ever seen something that tiny?
Hagrid's brows climbed and he slipped into English. He's got his father's scowl, but the hair? That's a Potter. You've done so great, Ariel. James is perfect, like his mummy. Hagrid cooed at her son, switching back again to common. Congratulations, Eamon. He patted him on the back. You're real lucky. Just look at the tyke. He's nearly as cute as a baby dragon. Ariel cleared her throat. Nearly? Shaking his head, Eamon rocked the babe when James showed signs of fussing while Hagrid went very still. Of course I mean as cute as... No, cutest of them all. You bet he is. Eamon gasped, the unexpected sound making something sharp curdle through her entire being. What's wrong? Harold pushed herself upwards, body protesting the sudden movement. No, all is well, but did you do that? Eamon asked, his voice breathy. With his blanket. Blanket? She asked. Likely, Maester Irvin said, pointing to where the curtains were dancing with the chandeliers. Queer things have been happening.
Nah, that wasn't Ariel. I think that was James, Hagrid said, chortling. It's instinctive magic. Better get used to little things like that happening. He just wanted warmth and wrapped the blanket tighter.
He did that? Eamon asked, as startled as Ariel.
Your boy's a wizard, Eamon.
Hagrid smiled proudly, patting Eamon on the back. His baffled marvel similar to her own. Ariel had known it would be so soon. She hadn't known what to expect. Ariel reached out. He'd been gone too long. It was her turn again. And Eamon across the room to place James back in her arms.
I'll go,
Hagrid sniffed.
I'm so glad to see you're doing well, Ariel. But you need to rest up. James too.
You as well, Ariel realized. You've been up through the night.
I will, but should I tell everyone first? Those who might be up at this hour, anyway.
Ariel could only think of one at that moment. Embert might.
I'll go tell him then.
Eamon laughed, but when she glanced at him, he just shook his head and kissed her brow. Remember, after the baker, to go inform the Hans Valette, won't you, Hagrid? So the king and mine family will know of the new prince's birth when they awake?
Sure, of course.
Eamon's fingers combed through her hair, and she leant into the comfort, the exhaustion creeping back up. She hadn't known she could feel so much. Raw and beaten and scared and wondrous. Even as her eyes drooped, her heavy arms held steady. James grew silent, breathing evenly out as his eyes closed and he fell asleep on her chest. Was that wrong? Shouldn't he nurse before sleeping? Should she wake him? She wanted to join James's rest and fade into dreams, but Ariel had to take care of him now, It was a terrifying and incredible prospect, yet unbearable to fail at, to hold his life in her inexperienced hands.